events impact us more than others, Lord. But you do. You know exactly what's going on. You are sovereign. You know the past, the future, all eternity. And we trust in you, Lord. There's a lot of evil in this world, and again, it's a testimony again of just the brokenness of man and how we need you and how we have to search you, Lord, to find that peace, to find salvation. God, you've given us Jesus Christ to die for our sins. And I just pray that more and more people will see you, Lord. More and more people will come to know you, come to accept Jesus. And right now, Lord, we want to pray for the families of the victims who perished at 9/11, 2001, September 11th, 15 years ago today, Lord. Pray you continue to be with them, to guide them, to comfort them, especially in this day that just brings back so many memories. Lord, I also pray for all the first responders of this country who will be there to respond right away at a moment's notice when something major happens. Lord, whether it's the EMTs, whether it's the fire department, whether it's police department, chaplains, all those other organizations, Lord. Thank you for them, and I just ask that you also keep providing for them, keep being with them and comforting them, Lord. Strengthen them as well, as it does take a toll. Lord, and I pray for our country. I pray for the safety of our country, that you protect it from any harm. Lord, we don't want to see any more death, major catastrophes here, Lord. May you just thwart the plans of anyone wanting to do harm or cause any harm to this country. Protect us. Be with us, Lord. Show us the way we should go. Thank you, Lord, for being good to us. In Jesus' name, amen. I think it's Robin, if there's any more announcement that I missed. You weren't here, huh? You're good? Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. Well, that was a prayer for our country, for 9/11. What I want to do now is just pray that the Lord speak to us. I want to pray one more time that the Lord speak to us through his message today. Lord God, again, we come before you and ask you that you speak to us through this message today. Lord, you planned this day and you planned this time and you planned for everyone to be here, and you have a message exactly for them and for us. Open the hearts, the ears, the minds of everyone here, Lord. May they see the message that you want to share with them, that you want to give them, Lord, and use me as well, Lord. Humble me and use me as your mighty instrument. Lord, we and bow down in humbleness and adoration and just use our hearts, Lord. Use our minds and to just do amazing work, not just within ourselves, but with our families and in the communities as well, Lord. We focus on you. We praise you and adore you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so before I begin sharing this morning's passage, I thought it was important that I review a few things that we covered from last week, because there's a lot of relevant information. There's a lot of things that tie into our passage this morning. Last week we read how Jesus had been led to leave the other side of the Sea of Galilee immediately after teaching. He had left that area that he was at teaching, possibly Capernaum, and he told his disciples, you know what, let's go to the other side of the mountain, other side of the sea. It was one of those quick kind of a deals. Jesus actually didn't get off the boat to mingle with the crowd and to minister. He just told the disciples, you know what, let's go to the other side of the mountain. And when one of the other Gospels tell us that it was about just 5 miles away. So regardless of whether Jesus knew or didn't know what his purpose was for going to the other side of the sea, Jesus completely obeyed and trusted and relied on the will of the Father. That's one of the points we covered last week. Another one was his trust in God the Father gave him such a sense of peace and security that he was able to sleep through a storm so violent that his disciples actually thought they were going to die. Now, another point from last week that will help us better understand our passage for this week is the authority that Jesus had. In last week's passage, we saw that Jesus had the authority to calm the wind and the storm. When the disciples thought they were going to die and they woke Jesus up and they asked him, don't you care that we're going to die? Jesus went to the front of the ship, in front of the boat, and just rebuked that wind, told us the wind to calm down, rebuked the sea, and they listened. Even the wind and the sea obeyed Jesus. And we'll see this week how that authority, the authority of Jesus Christ, how it's also displayed. In our story we'll read from chapter 5 this week. We'll be going to focus on these three particular aspects of the story. The first aspect we're going to be looking at is the frightening torment that a man endured being possessed by a legion of demons. We'll also see how these demons fearfully submitted to the authority of Jesus. And finally, we'll see how Jesus liberated this man and how he went from a monster to a powerful witness and a messenger of Jesus Christ. Those are the 3 points we're going to be covering. And, I as I put this together, there was a lot of information. I even learned a lot of stuff in here. There's just a lot of good information here. I know that I grew as a person, and I was able to see this story through a new light, new perspective, and I just want to share those things with you this morning. So let's begin reading. I'm going to be in Mark chapter 5. I'll be in Mark chapter 5 this morning. In the Bibles that are there in your chairs, it's going to be on page 554. Mark chapter 5. Mark chapter 5, starting in verse 1. It says, Then they came to the other side of the sea, to the region of the Gerasenes. As soon as he got out of the boat, a man with an unclean spirit came out to the tombs and met him. He lived in the tombs. No one was able to restrain him anymore, even with chains, because he often had been bound with shackles and chains, but had snapped off the chains and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. And always, night and day, he was crying out among the tombs and in the mountains and cutting himself with stones. Now, the region of Gerasenes, I have a map here I want to show you real quick. Okay, so in some translations, Gerasenes, in the New King James Version, is one of them. Gerasene translates as is also known as the Gadarenes. Now, the Gadarene region was this right here where it says Gadara. So it says that Jesus entered this area here, this particular area, the Gadara. Now, from what most scholars would say that this event took place around this southern area, the Sea of Galilee, or in the southeast area. The exact location isn't known, but that's where a lot of scholars believe the event happened. So we see that if Jesus was in Capernaum, he just traveled just a little bit south, and that's where he ended up, and that's where this event ended up happening. We're going to be coming back to this map, but I just wanted to show you real quick that the region, the Gerasenes, also known as the Gadarenes, is right here, around this area here. Okay, now the area is a predominantly Gentile area, and if you don't know again what a Gentile is, according to the Bible, there's only two classifications of people. You have your Jews, and then you have your Gentiles. You have your Jews that obviously they were known. One of the biggest factors that they were known by was the covenant of the circumcision. And I really won't get into that, but if you're not circumcised, if you're not a Jew, then you're considered a Gentile. Now, this was predominantly a Gentile area. Verse 2 tells us that as soon as Jesus stepped out of the boat, a man with an unclean spirit came out to meet him. Now, we've already seen that when the Bible talks about an unclean spirit, what is it talking about? Well, again, the Bible mentions that an unclean spirit. When the Bible mentions an unclean spirit, it refers to an evil demonic spirit. Notice also how this evil spirit came out of the tombs to meet Jesus. This evil spirit, or this man, lived among the tombs. Demons know that it's pointless to hide from God. They know they can't hide from God. I mean, we've seen even from Genesis, Adam and Eve tried to hide, they couldn't hide. God knew where they were. But these demons, especially because they knew who God is and they know the plan of God, they can't hide. They can't hide from God. Now, their method typically is just to confront and accuse. That's what these evil spirits do. And that's what we see them do in this particular case. Their method is to typically confront and accuse. Now, this man with an unclean spirit lived in the tombs, and these tombs were different than what we think about tombs today. When we think about tombs, we think about these big structures with, maybe a big room where they have a bunch of maybe urns where they keep, maybe a family keeps all their the ashes of relatives, or maybe they could be just one big tomb for one individual. And maybe you've seen them before at cemeteries, but some of them are really flashy. Well, here, these tombs were again, people did bury their dead, but these were more like small caves. These were more like small caves found in the hills and mountains in the area. So either they would be dug out by people or they were just naturally there. But all they were just small caves. More than likely, these tombs were similar to that Lazarus and Jesus had been placed after they had died. Again, if you remember that story, when Jesus went to go visit Mary and Martha, and when Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, he was placed in a tomb. And also when Jesus died, we see that also that he was placed in a tomb and the rock was rolled over that tomb. Now this man, he lived with and was constantly surrounded by decaying corpses of dead bodies. That's all he was surrounded by. Just dead bodies. Dead, stinking, decaying bodies. I mean, and we're not given the exact details, but he was probably just chilling out with these bodies, these dead bodies. I mean, what a horrible place, what a horrible condition to be in. Just living among the dead, dwelling among the dead. All he smelt night and day was the decomposing bodies of dead people. Again, what a horrible image, what a horrible just condition to live under. Now, this is what we also know about this man. This is, here, according to Luke's account of the story, he was demon-possessed for a very long time. Also, Luke tells us that he roamed around completely naked and lived outside pretty much like an animal. He was just walking around that whole tomb area, around those hills, around those mountains, completely naked, no clothes at all, living like an animal. Verse 4 in our passage here tells us that this man had supernatural strength. Chains and shackles couldn't restrain him because he would break them. He would be placed in chains and shackles around his wrists and around his ankles, and he would break them. And we also know that absolutely no one was able to restrain him. No one was able to subdue him. No one was able to take him down and hold him down. No matter how big, how powerful that person might have been, there was no one strong enough to subdue him. This man was also in self-torment, constantly in torment. We're told that he would cry out all the time during the day and night. He would cry out. Around those hills, people would hear him in the middle of the night. Now, I did a word search on that crying out sound, and one of the definitions that came up was that it was like a croaking sound. It was a screaming, like ear shaking sound. The kind that just doesn't sound natural. Now, the definition didn't mention it was like a sound that a crow would make. And even that sound, I put an audio sound of a crow, put it on YouTube, and it's not a good sound to hear. It's actually a pretty ugly sound. But anyways, what I'm saying is that something about his voice was just unnatural when he would cry out. And it was just haunting people day and night. And we also know that he would cut himself constantly with the stones. He kept cutting himself. He was in so much agony and so much pain that he would get the sharpest stones that he could find and just cut himself. Anywhere, just everywhere. This was the condition that this man was in. Now we have to remember that this person didn't start this way. He wasn't born like this. He wasn't born in this condition. At some point, these demons took possession of him. Now, due to his ongoing irrational behavior, whatever he was doing that allowed these demons to come and take possession of him, it started affecting him, and it started his behavior, his attitude started just becoming really irrational. Now, it got to a point that the community said, you know what, we're done with you. We don't want to deal with you anymore. You're absolutely crazy. You're nuts. You're out of here. We just go away. So they sent him out there to the hills, to the tombs. And that's where he made his home. And that's where he just lived among the dead bodies. They pretty much considered him a dead man walking. A living dead man. He became a social outcast and was completely ostracized by society. No one, absolutely no one wanted to do anything to do with him. If this man had a family, lost. They didn't want anything to do with him. Children, wife, didn't want anything to do with him. He lost everything. And these demons, again, just tormenting him day in and day out. Now, if you ever wanted to know what demon possession looked like, if you've ever been curious, hey, what is the difference? What is demon possession? How do I know if someone's been demon possessed? Well, here, these first verses 3 to 5 give us a pretty good description of what that looks like. And honestly, as I try to imagine myself confronting this man on my own, I find it absolutely terrifying. I find it completely terrifying, the thought of this man approaching me and me having to confront him. With the image we just described, oh man, I alone by myself, no way. I wouldn't be able to handle it. I probably would run away like a little girl. I'd be like, this is scary. This is no way. You see, I've been trained to deal with people, to handle people under the influence of drugs or alcohol. I've gone through that kind of training, how to deal with people, how to handle those kind of people that are either high on drugs or under the influence, and how to be able just to control the situation. My training has also taught me how to deal with people that may have had a mental disorder, or they may have a mental disorder. But without Christ, there's no amount of training that would be able to prepare me or anyone to deal with a man possessed by demons. Now, yeah, if we look at a person today, in the world we live in today, if a person like this appeared, we either would think he's insane, he's crazy, or he's high on drugs. Now, there are some pretty strong drugs out there that may do this to a person, but the scriptures here are clear and obvious that this man was possessed by a demon. This wasn't insanity. This wasn't drugs. This wasn't alcohol. This was a man possessed by demons. Now, I believe we have to use wisdom and discernment when it comes to demonic possession, because not all demonic possession is a mental disorder, and not every mental disorder is a demonic possession. Now, I feel strongly about this, and I hope that one day, as this church grows, and I'll be able to talk more about, or maybe do a series on mental disorders, and what the Bible teaches us, or what we can learn in the Bible about mental disorders. But I wanted to take a quick minute just to say that it's dangerous to automatically assume that every person with a mental disorder has been possessed by a demonic spirit. You see, more damage can occur when, rather than seeking medical treatment, people with mental disorders are treated as though they are demon possessed. Many factors have to be taken under consideration before coming to that conclusion. That's why it's important that we educate ourselves. That we educate ourselves about real mental disorders. I know there's people out there who may think that just because someone has a bipolar disorder, that they're demon possessed. Just because they're depressed, they're demon possessed, or they're influenced, by. No, it's not always the case. There are days, honestly, where I get depressed. In my past, there have been times where I've self-medicated just so that I wouldn't deal with the depression. But it's real. These mental disorders are real. And a lot of times they're caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain. However, again, there is a segment in our, within our Christian brothers and sisters within the church who believe that that's nonsense. I'll tell you that, again, we have to be careful when it comes to that. It is possible that a person can be possessed by a demon. But again, what we see here in verses 3 to 5 is a good indicator. If that's something to look for. If that person is displaying any of these attributes, then probably that person is demon possessed. Again, however, with the description we've already been given and what we will continue to read about, this man wasn't suffering from a mental disorder. This was a real demonic possession, and the kind that can only be handled by the power of Jesus Christ. So let's keep reading. Verse 6. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and knelt down before him, and he cried out with a loud voice, "What do you have to do with me, Jesus of the Most High God? I beg you before God, don't torment me." For he had told him, Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." Now try to imagine the scene. Try to imagine the scene in your head. After a long and terrifying night out in the sea, Jesus and his disciples finally get to shore. Now his disciples were probably relieved. They had just gone through this crazy, violent storm in which they thought they were going to die. And they were probably relieved and still in shock because of what they just experienced. And also, they were probably in shock about what they just saw Jesus do with the wind and the sea. He told the wind and sea, "You know what? Calm down, stop." And it did. Man, their minds were probably just going in a million directions. Those 5 miles they traveled across on that lake must have felt like thousands through an ocean. What a night. What a night they experienced. But now, as soon as they get off this boat, they see a man in the distant hills making his way towards them. As they get off the boat, they off in the distance, they see a man coming towards them. They see this figure coming towards them. Again, try to imagine the scene. As he gets closer and closer, they begin to see his frightening condition. He's completely naked and covered in dried blood, cuts, and scabs. The hair in his head and his face, because by this time, we're talking about years here, he probably has long hair, a long beard, and it's completely matted, it's completely dirty. It probably has bugs in it, completely unkept. I mean, we're talking about just a scene out of some scary horror movie. He just didn't look normal. Now, also his eyes were probably bloodshot, hollow, and sunken due to the lack of sleep. Have you ever seen anyone like that where they tell you, I haven't slept for days, and their eyes are just hollow and they're swollen, or you can just tell they haven't had any sleep. And this man, because he was crying out night after night, probably wasn't able to get any rest at all. And then also as he comes closer, the disciples begin to see the broken shackles and chains that were hanging from his wrists and ankles. Now again, like I said, try to imagine the scene, and absolutely terrifying if this man was approaching. Even within our group here, I think all of us would probably run away. But Jesus remained there. He stood his ground. He didn't have any fear. He knew God was with him. Now this man, as he got in front of Jesus, was now kneeling before Jesus. And he probably looked more than a monster than a man. A monster. A human monster. Absolutely, again, terrifying. Now, this wasn't the first time Jesus encountered a demon-possessed man. I mean, he had been doing this since chapter 1. We've seen that. We've covered some of those times. What made the situation unique was that there was resistance when Jesus commanded this evil spirit to come out of this man. Now, speaking through this man, the evil spirit said, "What do you have to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you before God, don't torment me." The demons that had taken possession of this man thought that they could use their host, thought that they can use this man as a human shield. But all they really did was make themselves more apparent by revealing who Jesus truly was and revealing their fear of him. Because they were scared. This response here, what they said, tells us they were shaking in their boots. These demons were scared of who they were in front of. Now, it was this statement and their resistance that prompted Jesus to investigate further. Not because he needed to, but just because he wanted to. Jesus understood that there was a purpose behind this entire situation and wanted others to be a witness of that purpose. Now, yeah, he could have easily said, you know what, you demons, all you evil spirits, get out of that man, and they would have obeyed and they would have listened. But no, he understood there was a purpose behind it. He knew that this was for a reason, and that's why Jesus asked him what he asked him. And we'll see that in just a second.